You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 244 of Arsenal Pass. This week on the pod, we are talking all things fresh meta as we are just a couple of weeks away from the road to national season, which seems insane because we're still in 2025, but we're about to be in 2026. Hayden Dow here with Pankaj Bhojwani as always. Pankaj, how we doing?
I'm feeling good. I played a calling this past weekend. Let's just jump straight in, into this week in Flesh and Blood. I played calling Seattle this past weekend. I brought Syndra because I got the Verdans beaten out of me by Yuki, and then I got the Marlin beaten out of me as well by multiple people.
By anyone in
so
Armory.
I decided just
Yeah.
I just defaulted to Syndra. Brought it to calling Seattle and had a great time actually. Ellie, Yuki, and Peter crashed at my place. So it kind of just ended up being like a fun sleepover too with friends, and then calling itself, had a good time. I definitely didn't play as well as I should have, maybe. I think part of that was picking up Syndra like a few days before the event, which, despite being an aggro deck, definitely has quite a lot of technicality.
Definitely does.
Yeah. I think... Looking back, I think I remember I went 4-3 in the end, and I think one of my losses I could have flipped if I played better. The other two, I think, were kind of out of my hands. I think even if I recouped like a few missed points here and there, I lost by too much for it to really matter. Those two losses were against Marios. But I did also win against two Marios. I played like 4 Marios, which is a little unfortunate. Went 2-2 into them because I think our list was actually quite prepared for Mario and quite prepared for the mirror. Unfortunately, I didn't play any mirrors. Played like 4 Marios. And then the Kasai, that was the one which I think I could have flipped if I played a little bit tighter. But yeah, overall, just had a really fun time. Shout out to Thaminda for making top 8 again. The last time we saw in top 8 was Calling Portland, where he top 8 on Dash.io. And now he just top 8 on Gravy again. And this guy, he's like such a beast. He like doesn't even... Like he plays armories, but he doesn't like, hardcore test. And then he just goes and snowboards every weekend and it just shows up in top 8s of calling casually. Shout out to Yuki as well for making it to top 8 on Syndra. That was really cool. And something's really weird with the universe because somehow we had a Kasai beat a Kano again in the finals, which is just absolutely insane.
But then Kano allowed anyway.
True. Kano was already LL'd by then.
Oh, it LA'd from... What did it LL from?
Yeah. Vienna? Battlehardened Vienna.
From the battle. Okay, sure. That makes sense. Okay. So it was already done and dusted by the time top 8 happened. Yeah, it's so funny. That was the Matt Dilks beating Margin in PTLA's calling last year. So funny. After Matt Dilks cut all his arcane barrier from the PT because he paired into Brendan Patrick round 1, got absolutely trashed and was like, I'm not even going to bother trying to beat Kano, and then plays Kano in the final, wins, and then
Yeah, and then Chris Ali does the same thing here. Somehow it was wild.
Well, goodbye Kano. Should move on to my week in Flesh and Blood. Honestly, I've not played any Flesh and Blood this week. I have watched a couple of rounds of coverage. I looked at the ban and restricted and started to make up my thoughts for what that's going to mean. I've started to think about the decks I want to test over the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to test this week, but next week I will start to test for Road to Nationals. So started to think about that, which we're going to talk about. That's the main topic of the pod, is the ban restricted, all the fallout from that, what we expect to happen, what decks we think winners, losers, etc., and a little preview of Road to Nationals in terms of what we think the meta might start to look like. But yeah, nothing else from me.
Yeah, we had all these plans to do these retrospectives and stuff, and then suddenly they throw a BNR at us that we need to discuss. And it's actually very soon before RTN season's upon us. It's like 3 weeks before RTN starts. So it's this little lull period actually feels a lot shorter than it typically should be, because normally RTNs start like later in January or maybe even February.
Last week of Jan, yeah.
But because it's first week of January, it's kind of starts. But like, wait, this lull period, you kind of want to start testing already.
So I was going to ask you about that. Like, how do you feel about that? Because it's quite a big change, in terms of things are happening much earlier. There's no real off season this year in terms of Worlds was just a few weeks ago. There was a bunch of like callings and battle hardens to end the year, and now we're going to straight into Road to National season. There's literally, for the first time since they decided to release Dynasty in December a few years back, that we've not had a true off season.
So how I feel about it, I feel like it's very oddly specific and very current. Something I want to talk about this past weekend, the calling. So Peter and I both played on stream day one. And then after day one, we came back to my place and we are just hanging out. We are having some soju. And we also decided to review our stream games, right? So, we put up Peter's game, we looked at it, we spoke about it. We put up my game, spoke about it. And Peter and Yuki are both way more experienced Syndra players than I am. So, they're giving me like their insights on the plays I was making and stuff that maybe I should have thought of that I didn't in the moment and things like that. And it kind of made me itch to do more of that. I've already booked my flight to Columbus. I'll be playing the calling in Columbus. Nice. And it just reminded me of like back in the day when I used to like compete more often, when I used to analyze my own replays. Like just that feeling of sitting down with them and discussing lines, talking about like different like branching paths and stuff made me want to do more of that. Made me want to like prepare harder for the next calling rather than this one where I kind of just like picked up a deck and just tried to jam a few games and then showed up to the calling with it. It made me want to prepare harder. It made me like want to compete even more. So to answer your question about how I'm feeling about the shorter off season is I'm sort of feeling pumped anyway to go and start like competing and putting more like actually like preparing further for it. But I do recognize that that's very oddly specific to me, and especially right now, given that I just had a calling that I played that sort of invigorated me to like compete harder. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think that makes sense because you've also gone through a year of, you spoke about this a few weeks ago of wanting to play more like Flesh and Blood competitively, right? In terms of you've been in the booth a lot this year, and you've now played a couple of events this year. The bug gets into you. I think it's indiscriminate when that bug hits you, right? In terms of time, it's about how you feel, what you enjoy. Also, getting a nice win on stream is always good. I feel like it always you're like, okay, people can see me, I can play. I don't know.
It was particularly when we were doing the replay analysis, like just like on my couch, we're like looking at it, and they were telling me of these things that they would have thought of in that spot. Alternate plays, and then we're doing a little back and forth. We're talking about it. It was that. I want more of that, which I feel like I haven't gotten too much of. But
winning is fun, but also so is like self-fulfillment of growing and developing, and doing that with friends. And that's part of it. It's like this game is community as well in terms of how you travel to events together. You test together, you help each other improve. One of you has a good weekend, all of you, in some way, have a good weekend, right? So yeah, it's very cool. How I feel about this specifically, I think you can pick and choose. I think they're giving people what they want. They're going to make a change, which we'll talk about for Road to National season, which I like. But I think you can choose not to play through December at all, if that's what you so wish to do. You could, and that's kind of what I'm doing to an extent. Now we've got a ban and restricted announcement. Everyone's on fresh ground, equal footing as well. We can start testing and go play your Road to National season, and then we just get into it from there. And then we all, or you could just say, you know what, I'm not going to play until Compendium's out. Maybe either you're fortunate enough to feel like you're going to get an automatic qualification for nationals anyway, or you don't intend to play, or whatever it might be, and you could say, actually, you know what, I'm just going to wait until we get Compendium, go into the ProQuest season, whatever it might be, and go that way. So I think everyone can pick and choose. I think with these more structured seasons that we have now, and especially now how they're framing around World Tour and Player of the Year and the structured seasons, you can choose when you jump in and out if you really want to. You might say, actually, I'm going to take this season off, and then I'm going to come back into it. And, like personally, that's something that I'll probably consider doing at some point, is maybe just even taking a full season off, which is a set and a tier 4 event, and then come back in. And I like that. So I'm a fan.
I think the other aspect of it is that RTN season is like over a month. Like it starts like Jan 3. About exactly a month. Starts Jan 3 and ends Feb 1st. So you could still sort of have like a pseudo off season until like the mid of Jan and just play the last couple of weeks. And RTNs are easier is a little bit of the term I want to use here for like qualifying, because you need to make
Yeah,
top
top
4
4.
rather than top 1, right? So you can just be like, I'm just gonna play the last 2 weeks and get my qualification then if you're confident enough.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. If we move on to the news, there's not much, but take it away.
So first thing, Kano LL'd. We already spoke about this in This Week in Flesh and Blood. So I'm sure a lot of people are happy about that. I'm sort of like ambivalent. I guess a lot of people get their sideboard slots back, which is kind of cool. Like, I think a lot of the assassins, for example, were playing the AB spell void pieces, at least that many of them, like up to 3 just for Kano. And now it can go back down to maybe like just 1, and that's for like the Asilios and Avertances. There was a ban list, which we'll speak more about in the main topic. And we had a winner. Congrats to Chris Ciali for taking down Calling Seattle on Kasai, which is very, very impressive. And then there's one piece of news which was slightly controversial, but they cleared it up, and I'm very happy about this. Is there was a concern about the world premiere in London and about spoiler season regarding it, because this world premiere is Silver Age, so it's a constructed format, it's not limited, and a lot of people were worried that they wouldn't they wouldn't know what commons and rares are in this set if they show up to world premiere, firstly, and then secondly, because they don't know the commons and the rares, if they don't have their deck list prepared beforehand, they won't know what commons and rares outside of Compendium they would need to have on them, right? They might need this random common from Everfest or something, because there's some rare in Compendium that works really well for it. So they cleared it up. All commons and rares will be revealed by January 31st, I believe is the date.
So what's that, 1 week before?
Yeah, slightly over a week before the world premiere. Like a week and a half before the world premiere. So people can have their decks and like start brewing before they show up to London, which I think is awesome, and I'm glad they cleared that up, because I think that was a very, very real concern that a lot of players had who wanted to show up to world premiere. I actually knew of some players who decided they weren't going to show up to London because of that, and I think a lot of them can change their minds now. So shout out to them for that.
Yeah, so James White tweet about that. I think as well, I was also thinking not only is it for the players, but it actually extends beyond that. It's like, okay, you're a vendor going to the event. Like, what cards do you bring? Like, do you commit to trying to bring commons and rares, and that's so difficult. And so I'm glad we got a little bit of additional information, which is great. The ban list we'll get into. Kano LL. It's a sad day personally. To see the back of Kano, a hero that's been in my life in a few different ways. Blitz, first ever sort of skirmish. I mean, skirmish is done now as well, right? But my first ever skirmish, I played Kano in skirmish season 1. I played Kano, of course, at PT1, the first ever World Championships. So yeah, it's a bit sad to see Kano go, but also I've not touched much Kano in the past 2 years because I hated the monster that Kano had become, to be honest. It wasn't my Kano, you know what I'm saying? That wasn't my Kano. So,
I know exactly what you're saying. Like, Kano was the hero I started with when I started Flesh and Blood. Like, first cards I ever bought was Kano for Blitz. And then I had so much fun with it, I was convinced I could make it work in CC, and I was just playing him in CC as well. Although when I was playing Kano and Viscerai in CC, mostly Viscerai, but I still wanted to like have Kano in CC built. But yeah, I totally echo your sentiment. Although I think I got my sort of aversion to what Kano had become earlier than you. The moment Wildfire came out, the deck changed from like what I enjoyed about it. I enjoyed like the Chain Lightning shenanigans, like Chain Lightning snapback type stuff, which is what I really enjoyed about the hero. But then Wildfire came out and it became what you, in a sense, pioneered with the whole Ragamuffins hat, Wildfire 36 damage combo thing. And once it became that, I was like, okay, I don't think I enjoy this hero anymore. So I do feel the past few years I haven't really engaged with Kano very much because it wasn't my Kano. But there is some element of just nostalgia / there's still a soft sentiment, right, for like the first hero I ever bought, having gone away now.
That's disrespectful, first of all. No, I mean that's fair enough. For me, do you know what? I have this thing that keeps coming into my Flesh and Blood life. It's red. These cards keep getting printed red, no blocks, either instants or actions, that have these they revolve around drawing cards and they have big game-changing impacts. I'm talking, of course, about
Kindle, Tome and then the Tome, right?
Yeah, I've already blanked the rest of the Tome's name out because it makes me that angry. But ruin my Kano, ruin my Dromai, it's just... Well, I can't remember the name of the Tome.
Honestly, I don't know why I can't think of it either. Tome of Imperial Flame?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
Common reoccurring theme. Anyway, goodbye, Kano. Should we get on to the Commander Cookout?
Yeah, let's
Actually,
do it.
do you know what's crazy? Kano, just quickly, I think, and I want to go back and check this. Maybe you'd know this just off the top of your head, Pankaj, but one tier 4 top 8 in LA.
Wait, you mean New Jersey? Wait,
sorry, outside after New Jersey, after New Jersey. Just the one after New Jersey. So 3 total.
Was that Felipe? It was Felipe, right?
Felipe, yeah. In LA,
yeah. I think you might be right.
I think that might be it. Kano accrued a lot of Living Legend points through nationals, callings, and RTN and ProQuest season where they got a decent chunk of points. Otherwise, it was just really sort of accumulating slowly. So yeah, there's a few. I mean, Azalea was kind of in that space as well, to an extent.
Did it not win many? Actually, it didn't win many callings either, right? Because it kept getting beaten by Warriors in the finals.
Kept losing in the finals. Anyway, let's get on to the Commander Cookout. If you want to get your question of the Commander Cookout, please do so. You can get them in YouTube comments below if you're a video watcher. If you're on our audio platforms like Spotify, you can drop it in the comments as well. We do pick those up on Spotify. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. If you are on YouTube and you do drop a comment, let us know it is a Commander Cookout question so we know that you're actually asking a question that you want to have featured in the Commander Cookout and not just, having a whinge about your favorite hero not getting any cards or whatever it might be. If you want to drop it and you're in the Discord, if you're an Arsenal Pass patron, you can do so. Or you can do what Colin has done and give us a handwritten note. And Pankaj, since this was given directly to you, I'm going to pass over to you to tell us the question this week.
Sounds good. So, by the way, shout out to everyone who gave me handwritten notes. I think I got like 2 or 3 over the past weekend. I love getting these, so keep them coming. How do you calculate what deck to bring to a tier 3 plus event? Going into Seattle, I had a ton of experience on Verdance, but didn't think she would be well positioned in the meta. I brought Syndra, which I think was better positioned, but I was worse at. How do you do that calculus? This is from Colin C, aka the guy at the table next to you. Because, for some reason, throughout side events and the calling, I kept getting paired. I kept getting seated in positions right next to Colin, which is really, really interesting. This question, I remember reading this feeling like I...
Have you noticed that, by the way? I've noticed that quite a few times where if I'm at the same record as someone over a few rounds, we basically, even in large events, I've had this at Pro Tours, I've had this at callings with 700 people, where we've been like basically at the same table next to each other or like 2 tables apart. I've had this with a friend once where literally we were the same. And obviously, I don't think there's actually anything in it, but it's just funny. I don't think there's anything to the gym, by the way. It's just funny.
I think it's one of those things like confirmation bias, right? You remember the times it's happened, but you don't remember all the events you played where it didn't happen.
Literally.
It's probably...
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. All right, so this question, I related so hard to this because I was literally going to play Verdance until like 3 days before the event, and then I responded with Syndra. So I guess in this case, I did the calculus by just, in a sense, being very impressed by this deck that kept beating me in testing. Which is, I think our Syndra list, the team Syndra list, was actually very, very well positioned for the meta. I think we had a Mario plan, which was good. I'm not going to say we were favored, but we liked where we were as opposed to the no D-Reacts, no Furnace version of Syndra. And looking at like the team's results, which was like me, Peter, and Yuki, basically, who showed up with Syndra at this list, we went 50%. We went 50% into Mario, like across the 3 of us. Like Yuki went 1-1, I went 2-2, and then Peter, I think, went 1-0. I think he only played 1, which I think is
you went 2-2, playing 4 Marios when you played 7 rounds, because unfortunately you didn't make day 2.
Yeah, I think Gem could have been kinder to me for sure. I think out of my 7 matchups, 6 were unfavored. My round 1 was against a Marlin, who I beat, and I played 4 Marios in a row, and I played a Kasai. And then, so that's 6, and then a Dash IO. And Dash IO, funnily enough, we're actually favored, our list, because, well, they never expect to get fatigued, so they side in a lean 60, and then we have 8 D-Reacts and Furnace, so it's actually pretty trivial to fatigue them if they bring in the lean 60. So that was like the only favored matchup I got, and the other 6 were all unfavored. But yeah, the team overall went 50% or better into Mario, which I think is like the best you can ask for. And then because the D-Reacts thing allows you to play much more of a mid-range game plan into the mirror, we were like very happy with it. So for me, the calculus for this one was just being very impressed by the list. And part of it also being like I was more confident I'll be able to play Syndra at a good enough level compared to something like Mario. Mario was like the other thing I was considering when I was like, I don't think I can play Verdance. I just don't think she's very well positioned, given I don't think she's positive into Syndra, into like the more refined Syndras that we're seeing now, or we were seeing pre-ban. I don't think she's like positive there. She's obviously not positive in the Gravy, and Mario's was shoring up the matchup to make it close to 50-50. So I just didn't really like Verdance's position, and I was like, I need to find something else. I was deciding between Mario and Syndra, and Mario, I think, has a higher skill ceiling than Syndra. I think Mario, there's a lot more nuance with like dagger management and stuff, which I felt like I couldn't get enough experience in like 2 or 3 days. Whereas Syndra, I was a little more confident. Like while she's technical, I think given how much experience I had, how much experience the team had collectively, I could like lean on that and perform at a decent enough level. Playing Syndra the Calling. So that was my thing on it. Normally my thing is, and we've had this argument before, Hayden.
Yeah.
Normally my thing is I want to play the deck I'm more comfortable and I enjoy more with. So that would have been Marlin, but that would have been just a little too much cope, I think. Like there is a limit, right? Like we've had this discussion before too, where I'm like, if you really enjoy Betsy, I'm still not going to say go play Betsy. But if, for example, if you have it, like, for example, I think if you really enjoy like Dash.io or really enjoy Acilio, for example, I would say just go play that instead of what you think is like the best deck. Yeah. That's like part of my calculus. But because I'm sort of lacking that right now, lacking the deck that I really enjoy that's also decent enough to bring, I just defaulted to like the list, which I felt I could pick up fast enough and was impressing me in testing. And I think had a unique, like, I really like the game plans we had for like the Mirror and Mario. It sort of convinced me. So that's kind of how I got to it.
You like look at a graph, you draw up a graph with like how good a deck is, and then like your cope, and you just find like where the intersection point is good,
is the highest. yeah, basically.
And then you just choose somewhere. You draw a circle and you go somewhere in and around here, ideally, not over here, and not down here.
Yeah, and you just go by whatever that first line is, the best deck.
Well, so
I'll let you answer this with your own words.
So this is the question. Like this question from Colin is a huge question. It's a question that I've spent a lot of time on for events because I think it is literally the most important question of how you decide how to play a deck for a tier 3 or beyond event. I've gone through a few different iterations, and there's a few different like rules I have, and I don't want to go into those because I think we can talk about that another time, and I've spoken about some of them on the pod before. But just to sum up what those rules are effectively, they're reasons why I would or wouldn't consider a deck. For instance, inherent power level, fragility to hate within a meta, how consistent the deck is, for instance. There's different things, and enjoyability is one thing that does come into it. But so one thing I do look at is I do actually look at a quantitative way of looking at what I think the best deck to play for an event is. And the way I do that is I effectively take all the decks in the format and I put them on the top. And then I take the decks that I think are tier 2 or above, basically. And I put all the matchups in. I assign a numerical value to the matchups, and then I put in my expected meta share of what I expect those decks to be within the format, and then that spits out a number of the decks that have an over 50% expected win rate, and then I'm looking at decks that have maybe 52, 51.5, 52.5, 53% expected win rate based on what I am. And again, this is trying to be a science in a world where Flesh and Blood has art to it, because it's about how you decide how to play matchups. It's about card selection. But this is to the best of my knowledge how I can create a quantitative. Sorry, I think I said qualitative earlier. Obviously, this is very quantitative. A quantitative setup. Then I will go to qualitative once I have those things. So I might have some decks. I'm like, these 5 decks all have fairly negligible differences between their win rate, or maybe there's 1 or 2 that, based on what I'm seeing and how I think their matchups are right now and the meta expectation, have really high expected win rates. And then I'll actually go and list those decks out. Maybe I'm considering 4 or 5 decks, and then I'll just do more of a qualitative piece to it. I will say, okay, are these favored or unfavored into the top 3 decks that I'm expecting to play? I want to choose a deck that has minimum 2 of those matchups being above 50%. Ideally, at least one above 50 in the most played deck, and the second most played deck maybe around 50 would be fine with me. And then I'd go through and sit down and go, actually, how powerful do I think this is? Does this tick all my other rules and things that I'm not going to get into? So I do have a process for this now. Is it perfect? No, definitely not. And there's sometimes where I go back on it and say, actually, I don't think this is right, or my inherent bias towards how I think a matchup plays out changes how I put in my expected, matchup favored or unfavored calculation into things. But it does give me, I think, a bit of a sense check to say, am I doing the right thing here? Am I exploring the right decks? Am I spending my time on the right things? And I do this 3-4 weeks out. I think once I'm within 2 weeks of things, I will rerun numbers and things like that, but I'm focused on like 2 or 3 decks maximum. I'm not then picking a deck because it has the highest expected win rate. I'm only picking a deck that I know I can play, the one I have experience on. And sometimes I'll be looking at these 3 decks, to Pankaj's point, I'll be a week out and I'm like, or even a few days out, I'm like, you know what, this deck is the third of these, but I feel the most comfortable on it. I actually feel like when I sit down to play a particular matchup, even though it has a lower expected win rate than another deck, I personally think I have a higher win rate because I know how to navigate the matchup. So I know it's very long, but that's how I approach it. And I've now got a bit of a system in place that I go back to every single time. And if people want to hear more about this, I'm happy to talk more in depth about it at some point, share how I'm even happy to do a video of like how I set this up for an event. But I do it every single time for every single tier 4 and often for a lot of tier 3s that I decide to play in as well.
What are you talking about? Your massive grid, I guess, your chart?
It's a grid, yeah.
It reminds me exactly of, I mean, have you watched the card guys do this? Okay, why am I asking this? You don't watch any content. But the card guys do this. They call themselves like the chart guys every time they put out one of these videos. But they do exactly what you're talking about. They make the whole like matchup matrix for like 10 most probably represented heroes and be like their expected win rates into each other, the expected representation.
Yeah.
And it sums up at the end of it for like like a score, if you will, or like a overall win rate. That you can expect when you bring one of those heroes. It sounds like exactly what you do, which I think is it sounds like a very strong way to decide a deck that you want to bring if you're going purely off quantitative.
You've got to know what to do with that information, though, I think. This is something that I'll shout out to Sasha Markovic because we literally did this for PT. I think we did this for a calling before even PT1 actually, or it would have been PT1. So I've done this for a very long time now, in some way, shape, or form. I abandoned it for a while. I went back to it. I'm sure other people do something very, to your point, like the card guys do something very similar, right? But you've then got to be able to translate that information because that, for instance, that's why I go to the qualitative part next of actually listing out the decks and saying unfavored, favored, even. Because I'm like, okay, now just give me a word association with it so I can look down and go like, yeah, gut check. This deck, it might be second highest win rate, but actually it's because it beats all the chaff that might show up, not because it beats the top 3 decks or whatever. So, yeah.
And nowhere in there do you have a column for I will have fun playing this. So Hayden doesn't like.
No, I do. That's the qualitative. That's the qualitative. That's not the quant. That's the qual. Anyway, that's a great question from Colin. Honestly, it's something that I've devoted so much time to working out what is the best way to play. If I had to break it down, though, it comes down to meta expectation. It comes down to how good inherently a deck is. Like, I just won't play a tier 2 deck unless I think that the only reason it's tier 2 is because people don't respect it and it actually has this crazy position in the meta that people don't expect. And that happens 1 in 10 times. So I'm generally playing tier 1 decks at that point. Or I just hate them so much that I need to have some fun, which is less often. So I think those are the 2 biggest things that it comes down to at the end of the day. And experience, like knowing how to play it. It is important because you will just fail. You will just fail if you don't understand matchups and how competitive Flesh and Blood is now and how close games are, especially of particular matchups where people spend a lot of time on them or people read guides that people have published and have the strategy. Like you will just lose. You will lose things that you would say, oh, it's a 55% or a 60%er because someone has a plan and they know how to execute it and you don't. You will lose. Yeah, you'll lose a lot of games.
There's tons of knowing. Well, firstly, your position in the matchup generally overall, but then on a micro level, understanding like game states and your position relative to the current game state and what needs to happen to get you out of this position. Like say if you're in a losing position, or the reverse, what your opponent's trying to do to get them into a winning position if you're the one who's ahead. And it's very hard to explain this in a way that's very technical. I feel like sometimes like it's very specific to the heroes and specific to the matchup, but like once you play enough and practice enough, and this is the other thing I was talking about, like when I was going through my game with Yuki and Peter, this is the other thing that reminded me that once you go really deep into these heroes, recognizing those moments in games where you need to recognize your position, what you're supposed to do in this position, might be a little bit different than the overall macro game plan you had, just because of the current game state. Like you need to take a bit more of a higher risk in the spot, or maybe you need to take a little bit more of a lower value in this spot because of reason X, Y, and Z. There's a lot that goes into it, and you need to make sure that you get that as well. That needs to factor into your choice of hero. Can you get to that point with this hero?
Yeah, because you're taking conditions, and you need to understand what those conditions are. This is the shit that gives me energy about this game. Like, this is the stuff that I absolutely love, because it is to me, this is the fun. Like, this, I'm sure for a lot of people it isn't.
Agreed.
But this is the fun to me. Like, dissecting and understanding what goes into making a decision not in a game. Ultimately, do you know what? Sometimes I sit down at an event and I play my first few rounds, and I go, I'm nervous. I'm not actually enjoying my games because I'm just so nervous about winning them. I'm more, my gut is more focused on the competition than it is on actually enjoying the games I'm playing right now. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen to me sometimes. But then I finish the event, however I place, good, bad, medium, and I think back on the process beforehand. And this is something that I got to shout out to Brendan Patrick, because he drilled this into me so well of, you own the process, not the result. If you own the process, not the result, you will always get something out of it, right? And I think now I just take so much joy in things like this of like, okay, how did I prep for the event? How did I choose the deck? And I've been so happy with almost every decision I've made for the last 2.5 years of events that I've played, of the deck, a tier 3 or higher of the decks I've chosen to play, because I've had a methodology, I've had a process, and at the end of the day, even if it didn't work out, I can still say that the process I went through was one that I believed in. Just love it.
Awesome.
Thanks for getting me G'd up, Colin. I appreciate it.
Does also give me a lot of energy and inspiration, if you will, and that's where the passion comes from, right?
100%. Let's get into the main topic of the pod, and we are going to talk final meta results. We'll chat briefly about the calling this past weekend, the results, and then the new meta that's ahead of us for this coming weekend and into the Road to National season with the ban restricted list changes. So we'll spend 5 minutes. Let's just quickly chat. Calling Seattle.
We don't need to talk about the calling too much.
Calling Seattle.
Old meta now.
It is old meta, but I think it's important to just almost plant draw a line in the sand of where we are today before we have these changes of what people were doing and what is going to change. So Syndra, Arachne, and Verdance, top 3 most played decks at Seattle. They were all fairly close in representation. I have my calculator here. What is that? Around 10 to 12% each of those top 3 decks. So pretty flat meta, right? Then you go down to high single digits as percentage with Gravy Bones and Dash.io. So that rounds out your top 5. So I think that's really a nice line to draw right now, as those were the top 5 decks. You then have a host of decks after that are really close, honestly, within a percentage or a percentage and a half of each other in that sort of 5 to 6 range percent representation. Acilio, Prism, Florian, KO, Dory, Marlin. And I think it's really, even down to Jarl and Kasai, it's really important to just see how flat this metagame is as we head into Road to National season and the changes to the meta. Because, yes, I think Alice has said it pretty plainly. They're also in some ways making a change to shake the format up to an extent, but also the format was pretty flat and fairly healthy. So it is quite interesting in terms of, I don't think there's, apart from those top sort of 5 decks, anything else outside of it still had a chance, I think, and we should remember that.
I mean, Kasai literally won the event.
100%.
Right? And
Kano was in the final.
8 out of 284. Yeah.
KO, Underhanded Cheat, made top 8, right? As 5 copies. So
exactly.
Any thoughts about just the meta overall from the weekend? Anything that did surprise you or didn't surprise you necessarily?
I think Verdance's high representation, more importantly, Verdance's conversion, I think was quite surprising. And I think that was maybe because of the increase in Mario representation. And I think here's where, when I was like reflecting on my choice for the event, bringing Syndra, obviously looking back, given my matchups, I would have like much preferred being on Verdance. But I was also wondering whether maybe I reacted too slow to the meta shift. I think Valencia showed us that a lot of the top players are moving towards Marinette. I don't think Marinette was like second most represented of Valencia. It wasn't quite that high, but the conversion was very impressive. But I wasn't expecting that many people to move onto it, I think. I think that's perhaps what made Verdance and Florian both actually quite attractive picks for this event. Because they're playing against Mario, it's like you play one of the Earth heroes and you actually feel all right. Like I said, Verdance Mario is not close to 50-50, but like Florian Mario is like quite Florian favored.
Yeah.
For example. So I think that's a part which, in a sense, surprised me the most when I looked at the conversion rate on day 2. Verdance 43% conversion rate and Florian with a 45% conversion rate. But if you look at it in the context of Mario being propped up, especially when you consider it's a lot of the top players on Mario, it starts to make a little bit more sense.
I think the other thing as well is just going back to how flat this meta is. I think when you look at everything around, when you say that, okay, now Dash.io is all of a sudden the 5th most played deck, when I'm thinking Earth, but then there's just this really flat distribution of like KO Armed and Dangerous, Warriors in there, Marlins, Jarls, like all these things, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me why Earth had such a good weekend, personally, just based on how flat that metagame was as well.
Yeah, although that being said, I think there were 0 Earth heroes in the top 8, which is interesting, but they had a good conversion into day 2, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this meta was very, very good. I said this last week where I was like, I'm not too big of a fan of a shakeup for the sake of a shakeup, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if the meta gets worse because of the bans and not better, but, we'll have to see how things shake out.
Yeah.
Just because I think this meta was already so good, it's hard for me to see how it improves. That's why I'm sort of just like, oh, you make a change to it, it probably gets a little bit worse. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
In terms of just, we spoke to representation, you touched on conversion a little bit there. Yeah, Verdance had it converted the most amount of decks, but had 43% conversion. Florian had 45%. Yao had a 50% conversion rate, which also actually makes sense to me as well. So there's some really strong conversion rates in there of decks that had decent representation. I'm not going to talk about Fire with its one getting through. But I think Gravy Bones, for instance, the one that stood out to me as well, 19% conversion, and Syndra at 20%. So tougher weekends for those two.
Yeah, and I will point out something that wasn't on the conversion rate chart, which is Marlin. There were 10 Marlins who showed up and 0% converted to day 2. So I felt a little bit vindicated not bringing that deck. Actually, I felt vindicated immediately. Like my round 1 was against a Marlin, and I lost the die roll. They chose to go second, and then I drew Warmongers, and I was like, cool. I just opened a Warmongers, so I got to go first and second, and I was like, yeah, this is why I didn't bring that deck. Like the first time they sent a harpoon at me, I was at 9. They were 19, and I was at 40, and I was like, okay, cool, yeah. This is. Anyway,
let's chat top 8 just very quickly. 7 different heroes represented. Again, speaking to that really flat meta, there were 2 copies of Gravy, but then otherwise 1 Acilio, 1 Kano, RIP, 1 Prism, 1 Kasai, 1 Underhanded Cheat, very cool, and 1 Syndra. So I think just, obviously, although Gravy and Syndra had bad conversion, they put 3 copies of those 2 heroes combined into top 8, which is still really strong. And actually, to your point, no Earth hero in the top 8. So I think there's always a piece to read into both conversion, and then because if you look at your top 16, you're going to have some of those Earth heroes in there. You're probably going to So I think you want to take, especially when we're trying to set a stage for what's to happen next, you should take a wider set of data, I think, than just top 8.
Mm-hmm. But 7 different heroes in top 8, which I
exciting.
think was very, very awesome. And the repeat and the 2 common heroes is Gravy, which is funny because he had like 90% conversion rate. So, but four Gravies made day 2, and then 2 of them made top 8, which is fascinating.
I want to just now touch on the ban and restricted because looking at the announcement, LSS said they spoke about in the dev talk. They were really, really happy and extremely happy with the healthy state of the meta, with there being 3 decks that were kind of slightly above the rest in Syndra, Gravy Bones, and Verdance. I think they were a decent chunk above, but within the parameters that I would like in this game.
But Mario, though, like, would you? I feel like Mario towards the last couple of weeks was actually going up and now becoming like one of the four, if you
Yep.
will. Do you think you would agree with that
Yeah, I would
paradigm?
agree with that. I would agree with that. I don't think it was as powerful as as those three decks, but I think it was finding the meta game position because of the health of the format, is what I would say. So yeah, makes sense. So they spoke about each of the cards they've decided to hit. We'll just talk through them. So first on the list is Brahma Cinderclaw. Let's do the heroes together. So Brahma Cinderclaw and Wrath of Retribution have both been banned. Pankaj, what was your immediate reaction?
I definitely wanted to see Wrath go. I think a lot of people called for it. I think I would have been happy if it was just Wrath. I think taking away Brand, I think it guts Syndra quite a bit. I think the deck either falls to below like Dash and Acilio, which basically means it's out of the format, or the deck needs to change significantly. And without seeing the change, like maybe they find a new version that maybe plays a few more blues and like actually swings the daggers by like pitching to it, and then it makes up for having fewer draconic chainlings that Brand gave you. And maybe that could be good. I'm gonna put a low probability on that one. So I'm gonna say I think my first take is that I think they maybe hit Syndra harder than they needed to. But at the same time, it's like when I come back to the context of this announcement of this brand restriction being that they want to shake things up, it does make sense. If you just hit Wrath and Syndra is still one of the top players in the metagame, but if they really want to just make a new villain, for example, then sure you hit Brand, and I think she's either out of the metagame or looks very, very different. Like I had games where I'm literally like, oh, I haven't seen a Brand yet, and I'm arsenaling or making decisions based on drawing
Yeah.
Brand in the next couple of turns. That's how strong that card was and how impactful it was for Syndra's best turns. So it's a pretty significant hit, I think, and also collateral damage to Fi, who was already in the ground, and he's just actually taken out back and like just destroyed.
I would put it this way: Wrath of Retribution is the ceiling. Brahma Cinderclaw is the consistency. When it comes to what Syndra does, and it's huge. Like I was a big advocate of 6 brands through my whole time playing Syndra over this past season. Minimum 5 to 6, because I just think the card just gives you consistency. It gives you massive consistency, and without that, you have to rely more heavily on fealties. Maybe the deck has to change. To your point, turns with Oath of Loyalty gets a lot worse, for instance. So, I obviously a powerful card. So I think there's some big changes there for Syndra. Let's go on to Chart the High Seas, because this is a card that you called out in our previous pod as being a card that you absolutely hated, one of your worst cards of the year, and now it is banned, Pankaj. So you must be absolutely thrilled.
I was happy to see it, but I almost wonder whether they should have maybe spoken about this card last, because I feel like the other 3 heroes were hit way harder than Gravy was. Like I said, we just spoke about how Brand is quite instrumental to Syndra's game plan. The cards that were taken from Mara and Verdance were also like very, very important. And then Gravy just gets chart hit, which I mean, I agree. I hated this card. But in terms, with respect to how hard the other heroes were hit, where it's like for them it's like linchpin, like consistency pieces, Chart the High Seas was like more of like a high roll card on Gravy. It allowed him to like win aggro matchups, which he shouldn't have been able to win, because he just gets a gold and an ally off the top and a blue in his pitch, and he just plays the Soul Bones. Like Chart allowed like, oh, randomly in some game you're like behind, they play Chart, and he's gonna put a Soul Bones on the field and swing with it like off of one card. That's kind of how he like win games. He's like he gets a high roll his way like back into games that he's supposed to be out of. But he's still, I think, going to be very, very powerful and gonna retain his place as one of the mainstays of the format, I think, is my take. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly bigger ban than maybe you're saying. I think it's quite a significant ban. I think this, to your point, you said about the aggro decks, I think it is like the linchpin of being able to do some of the most disgusting comeback plays that you can do in this deck. So I think it takes away... I'm not going to say it's not awakening level of comeback potential, right? It's nowhere near that. But sometimes it does feel like a bit of an awakening when they hit the Chart the High Seas. They get the ally they needed. They get the blue and pitch, and the value of the card is just so
And the
sky
gold.
high. And the gold,
Yeah.
often the gold is so important as well. Sometimes they're double allying you off the back of it, which you're just like, oh my goodness. They had no allies in the bin to start the turn. They've played a Chart the High Seas. Now all of a sudden they've been able to put 2 allies in the bin thanks to the gold and the Chart the High Seas and play both or whatever it might be. So I think it is a big hit. But I also think that the context of the format potentially changes and it might not be in Gravy's favor, but we'll talk about that. Let's move on to
That
the
makes sense.
Orb Weaver Spinnerets. Blue and yellow both being banned, but red being untouched. What did you think about this as an assassin aficionado?
I need to talk about that real quick, the assassin aficionado part. I feel like a lot of people are asking me why I'm not on Mario, because similar thing, like, oh, aren't you an assassin player? I'm like, not the way Mario was.
That's so boring.
Like at that point, I feel like it was an aggro deck masquerading as an assassin. Basically,
100%.
it's all these 2 blocks, all these cards that you just want to resolve, you don't really want to block with.
The game plan was so linear.
A bunch of damage, and it's
Griffing.
not a lot of disruption. Yeah, his only disruption was like if you flip into Black Widow or use your hat, or mark the Black Widow and like leave no witnesses. It's like it wasn't like the assassins that like I liked, which was like new or stealth Mario, right? Like this version of Mario to me just felt like an aggro deck, and I was like, not so much my thing. Just to clarify the assassin aficionado part. But Orb Weaver, blue and yellow, again, consistency pieces, right? It's very similar to like the brand ban, where now it feels like maybe they're forced more games to use their hat to turn into Orb Weaver to get the Kallistra up. But then that sort of takes away one of the biggest, again, like comeback plays that the deck has, like into an aggro deck, like when you fall behind against a Syndra, you flip into Black Widow when you draw your Kiss of Death, right? That's what you're supposed to use a hat for in that matchup, and now you're forced to use it for Orb Weaver more games. So definitely takes a hit. I do wonder whether that maybe forces the deck to change, similar to like Syndra, where it's like maybe it just doesn't play for Kalishra that much, and maybe we see more of the stealth-based version of Mario that's playing a bunch of cards from the Slippy Armory deck, for example.
Yep.
Meet Madness, Infiltrate, Our Desire Body, and more like Stains of the Red back for Go Again, and the new boots, which can give Go Again without needing to hit, unlike Black Tech Whisperers. And then also, there's the blues. There's a blue that gives all your stealth attacks +1 this turn, and an attack reaction. I forget the name from the Slippy Armory deck. So I think that we might see a more stealth-based Mario come out of this, because the Dagger version definitely got nerfed, and to the point where, without a consistency anymore, I'm not entirely sure if it's appealing. Do you have thoughts? As Assassin Aficionado yourself, Chaos Assassin Aficionado, if you will.
Yeah. Knight's Embrace is the card you're thinking of, by the way.
Yes,
The blue pump. I'm dabble a bit these days, don't I? With the assassins. I think
you love their weapons, I've heard.
I do. I've come around to them. I don't like the old ones. They can nerve scalpel. But I do. Yeah, I know. I like this. I think it forces you to think a bit differently. I basically agree with all the things you say. I think it. I like it personally, and I think it was just going to be too efficient. I think there was a potential that you hit Syndra, you allow other aggro decks to come to the forefront, and then Marionette is actually just the aggro deck of choice, to your point. So I'm here for this one. I like it. I want to move on to Rootbound Carapace, because I think this was probably maybe the most even more so than maybe the Orb Weaver Spinnerets. I think people were actually okay with that. I think this is a divisive one because it's a hugely important card for the Earth Heroes to hit. I'm going to start on this one because I have a bit of a take on this one. I think this is a big on the surface, but I think the more you think about this, it does force the Earth Heroes to play differently. But I don't actually think that overall it is a mess. It forces them to be massively downgraded, because I think Verdance is crazy, crazy strong as a hero. And Gravy's been nerfed again. Syndra's been nerfed. I think they had to touch Verdance. I think Verdance plays now so well as this Bull-Lander style deck. And yes, once you obviously come online, that helps your efficiency. But yellow and blue Rootbound Carapace suck. Like, they actually just do. So really what this is a banning of red Rootbound Carapace, which is important. But I actually just don't think this is impactful as it seems on the surface. And I think Verdance is kind of getting away with one a little bit potentially, depending on how the meta shakes out to how important it needs to play defensively. Because I just think the offensive side of what Florian and Verdance can do with Felling at the Crown, even potentially Plow Under, depending on the way the format goes. For me, Verdance and Stormstriders. Like, Stormstriders is the big thing that pushes Verdance, plus the access of Earth cards and things like that. One thing that does obviously make Felling worse for Verdance is you don't go Rootbound Carapace into Felling, right? But there are a bunch of other cards that you can still be playing. Tilling is still good. It forces the deck to play a little bit differently, I think. But I ultimately think that it's not as huge an impact as it may seem, particularly for Verdance. Florian, I also have a theory, but I'll let you talk, Pankaj.
I think it's actually quite a big hit to Verdance. And I think what you pointed out, where you're saying her offensive output is kind of what makes her as strong as she is. And you touched on this at the end. I think hitting Carapace does actually hurt her offensive output, because I think we're going to see more and more Fellings come in for 4. And one thing that often happens in a lot of Verdance matchups is you will sort of win because you get them to Strider's range and then you're at like 1 or 2 sort of thing. That happens like quite often. And I think now, if instead, like, I've had games where I've literally lost because my first Felling came in for 4 instead of 8. And I'm doing the maths of like backtracking. And I was like, yep, if I could have made that come in for 8, I would have an extra card in this position, which means I'm not forced to give you my last card here, and I can actually like kill you with the Striders. So I think if there's more and more games where your Felling comes in for 4, your Plow comes in for 2, that actually gives the other side the space to overcome. So I actually do think it affects the offensive output too, funnily enough, given though it is a defense reaction. But of course, the question is, what is the replacement, right? I know some people I think of just replacing like with Fate Foreseen, but I'm like, then you hit both your fewer Earth cards, because Fate Foreseen is not an Earth card, and fewer Decomposes. And then some people are considering like Yellow Tilling, for example. But then that's obviously, it makes you more vulnerable. So I think it sort of depends what gets put in that spot. I know some people also considering just putting Pulsing Aether back in that spot, because we did cut that card, right? So you just put that as your Earth 3 block. It doesn't help you decompose, but it's a 3 block Earth non-attack. And since we're back on trees now, it can help with that. I do sort of agree with you that I think I think in maybe a few weeks, we might be like, wait, Verdance is still one of the top decks, and like we didn't actually change the villain on that front. But I think part of that would be because, to your point, the other decks got hit in some ways that sort of, they took away their offensive output too, like the Cinderas and the Marios. So now you're back into the Verdance can send a Felling for 4, but because your turns are weaker too, it's like she still gets you to the Strider's range as if, because you sort of lost like 4 points of value across your turns as well. So I do think we might end up in that spot, to your point.
That's kind of what I mean. I'm not saying it isn't a hit. Like, it obviously is. It is impactful. And Rootbound Carapace, Verdance is obviously much stronger with Rootbound Carapace. But I think that Verdance as a hero is just so strong, and as a wizard hero has so many utility tools and different ways that you can build the deck, that I think it's going to be able to get around it more so than people may think. Because when you start to think about it, you're like, wow, okay, less Earth cards in the deck, less Decompose, less sort of like in-game potential. And then you start to think about, well, could you just build this in a different way? There's even things like, could you even play like, so you're saying...
Don't say Blossoming Decay.
No.
Don't say Blossoming Decay.
I was gonna say blue Sofa tomorrow. You just play 3 blue because that banishes itself. But
I've heard that. Yeah.
Of like, there's other ways that you can work towards different game states, and Wizards are just, especially when you have the excessive Storm Striders and you have 40 health, it's just so flexible in the way that you build the deck. So that's where I'm coming from. I want to quickly touch on the Florian side of it. I think there's a real chance this might help Florian, which sounds weird. I'm not gonna hang my hat on this one, but Verdance gets a nerf, right? And when I say not the Rootbound Carapace specifically helps, but the total ban list actually helps Florian, and Rootbound Carapace is a part of that. Verdance obviously gets a hit. If you're playing a race game into Verdance as a Florian, they now, to that point, to what you said before, don't have the ability to just be the defensive side that decomposes, because that was always the challenge. You go, I've got to be aggro to beat them, otherwise they grind me in the long game, and they go, well, my defensive cards also help me do the thing I need to do. Whereas now they don't have access to that. They have to match you if they want to do that. I think that's a really big change. But also, I mean, the biggest impact might be losing a blue Earth card, but you can replace it with something else. That's fine. I think you get to maybe be an aggro deck that is playable again, because Syndra has had a big nerf. And I think Florian just wasn't that. So all of a sudden, if Verdance isn't as bad a matchup as it used to be, Syndra isn't a bad matchup for you anymore. I'm kind of interested in Florian again.
I think that's definitely worth exploring. I don't think they were running Blue Rootbound anyway.
No, probably
so not. Yeah, so it's like the CMH side of their sideboard didn't get affected, and that is what you wanted into Verdance and Gravy. And both of those decks did get nerfed. I think Syndra was a bad matchup for you as well.
Yeah, but I think that's actually how you beat Syndra.
Wait, CMH into Syndra?
I don't think you can beat them any other way, honestly. I think the matchup was bad.
That's fair. Yeah, it was bad. I mean, the Claw of Inseraka. To be honest, I don't think CMH beat them either. I still felt like the Florian was behind. But I mean, Syndra's potentially out of the meta too. And if it's like Dio's coming in, well, you just fatigue a Dio in your sleep, right? You don't need Ruban Carapace to fatigue a Dio. It's if Acilio comes in that like could be a problem for Florian. But I think there's a very real consideration to your point about exploring Florian again and see where he is.
It's interesting.
Which is interesting because I think a lot of people immediately were like, oh, he's taking collateral like the same way like Fi took collateral from the brand ban. But yeah, you're right. Maybe the rest of the game shifts in a way that's actually fine for him.
So we've spoken about all those bans. There was a Florian note here, and you said, "Oh, I said rip to my boy," but actually, I'm not sure that I agree with that note that I made after thinking about it. I want to talk about maybe a couple of the other decks now that we've spoken about those those 4 that have been /5 that have been touched upon, or 6 if you count Fi, and then would like to maybe talk a little bit about what next in this metagame. And I think the thing I want to go to first of all as we consider some of these, Dash.io was the 5th most played deck in Seattle. It's obviously been fairly well represented over the last few months, had a good ProQuest run as well. Is this good for Dash.io overall? It's got to be, right? Surely. Ruban Carapace is gone.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, Florian can fatigue a Dash.io without Ruban Carapace. Like they don't really need it. Verdance they didn't really have a primary game plan to fatigue Dash.ios anyway. It'll be like something that maybe they get there if the Dash.io stumbles. But it wasn't consistent enough that was a game plan. I guess without Carapace, it means that maybe they don't even have that out anymore. But again, it depends what they replace it with. If they just replace it with Fate Foreseen, then it's the same thing. Then it didn't actually change anything there.
Your Felling's definitely worse, to your point, though. And Felling has a big impact in that matchup all the time.
Well, not for the damage, though.
No, for the...
not...
Well, for just slowly bleeding them down while disrupting their game plan.
Right.
Same for Florian.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Gravy was already good. Syndra was already good. Normal Syndras were already good. I think Dio might actually just be in a similar spot. I think she some of her bad matchups got worse, but some of her good matchups got even better. I feel like maybe it's a little bit neutral.
And some other decks come up. I think it's about the same spot because I think some other decks that we might talk about potentially come up as well. So we've spoken about Florian even there, but Yao might have a better time if Verdance is worse.
Actually, could be worse. I think the main deck I want to look at, actually, where I want to start is honestly the deck that won the calling is Kasai.
Okay.
Because I think Verdance was a tough matchup. And if they lost Carapace, and I mean, depends where they land in the meta. If she's still very represented, I think trees and especially if they put Pulsing Aethers back in, I think Kasai really struggles against just tall Arcane. But Verdance is weakened and not really around anymore. I think she's Kasai looks really, really solid. She's already good into Gravy, and then Gravy got a hit as well. If Mario's go more stealth version, I think she'll be fine there as well. And then Syndra's already good. So, and if Dio's come up and stuff, then Kasai can fatigue a Dio in his sleep. So that's very, very okay as well. The other hero, which I think I want to start with, is Acilio. Acilio and Kasai, I think, are the first 2 heroes start exploring. Acilio being I think Syndra was a predator to Acilio, and if Syndra has sort of disappeared or not really around anymore, then Acilio feels sort of free reign, except unless Dio comes in and stops him. But then Dio has these other problems. So
I think Acilio. I have 2 winners that I think are really clear. I think one of them is Acilio, but I think Prism. I think Prism was already one of the most inherently powerful heroes in this format, but just was missing 5% against a lot of matchups. The Syndra matchup was super close. If they had any tech, it was really tough. The Verdance side was starting to turn around again. The Gravy side was just not quite good enough. And I think Prism's actually a big winner out of all of this, honestly. And as long as Florian stays down and the Carapace hit is impactful there, I do think Prism is a massive winner from this. Depends on other decks like KO as well. Does KO benefit from this? Because I think KO probably does benefit from this. But I do think there's a bunch of other decks that come into play, and Prism is just inherently a very powerful one.
I actually think, KO, we sort of glossed over him. I feel like people are oh, so KO gets better, right? And I was yes. And I just moved on to think about other things and completely forgot that, he did actually get better. I think he's in a similar spot to what you're saying about Prism, where Prism was just losing 5% in a whole bunch of matchups. And I felt similarly about KO, where he's strong, Whereas power level just wasn't on the level of like Verdants and Gravy and Syndra's. But now all of those got like hit a little bit. So now KO is suddenly like maybe potentially able to play. I think like the Super Slam upgrades were very good, and we haven't like fully felt it yet. Because these other heroes are sort of overshadowing it. But now I wonder whether people start being like, wait, this Reckless Stampede card actually kind of crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about it. So, yeah, actually, maybe Chaos is where to start as well.
Dude, I got to shout out to my... I know we're going deep. We're like, there's so many heroes here, and I promise we will give you something to hang on to. We will come back to what we actually think the heroes to start exploring first for Road to National Season before we round out this pod. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about right now. I do think it's interesting. KO ultimately probably just the better brute, or even underhanded cheat. Maybe honestly, underhanded cheat's in a good spot as well. But I think Syndra was Reinhar's worst nightmare. Not even close. Talk about percentage points. Gravy, just too much of an aggro deck, especially when they hitch up the high seas turns. That gets better for you. The Verdant side, like their Carapace value was just the thing. They were like, Carapace into fouling. You're like, right, I've done all this work to try and like set up these turns and give them 5-card hands they can't do anything with, and then intimidate them on key turns, and they've still been able to land a Carapace into fouling, which they can no longer do. So I'm just saying, I might be exploring Reinhardt for Road to Nationals.
My turn to add to the cope then. If people are gonna play a bunch of Dash.io and Asilios and maybe even some Syndra, bro, I'm slamming Marlon for RTN season and for Columbus as well. So we'll have to see how it shakes out, but she is on my radar. I think she's not quite obviously like KO, where I just need other decks to take a 5% hit to play her. But I think if aggro is like the name of the game and like the warriors aren't really showing up, then I kind of do want to explore the Pirate Ranger.
Yep, that's fair. The last hero I'll shout out is Slippy. I think Armory deck's out now. There's still a lot of exploring to be done there. I think prior to this ban, I still didn't have a lot of hope for Slippy, mainly because I think Verdant's matchup without Bonds, not good. I think the Gravy matchup, you without Bonds again, you used to be close. Gravy got a hit, but so did Slippy more so, I think, and just completely got taken out. But I do think
even the Syndra matchup, like without Bonds.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All the matchups.
So I think that just the nerf and power level of those top three in particular really level sets where Slippy had been with the Bonds ban, and now I'm interested again. And I think Slippy is inherently a powerful hero. So I think we've got to shut that one out. Plus Armory decks on top of that, obviously. So with all that said, we named a lot of heroes there, Pankaj. What actually do you think is probably going to happen in terms of what do you think ends up being potentially the top 3 decks in the format as we head into the start of Road to National Season? And what do you think are actually the decks worth exploring based on power level and potential position in the meta?
So Verdance and Gravy, I think, will still be around and still be strong and still be players. KO, I think, warrants exploring, and I wouldn't be surprised if he takes like quite a bit of like the RTN wins as well. And then Kasai as well. I would say like I'm putting these 4 forward. So basically Mario and Syndra replaced by Kasai and KO. Take the current meta, replace those 2 with Kasai and KO, and I think that's where we might land, or that's where at least the beginnings of the format will shape.
What's the dash...
Well, wait, what's your prediction?
Well, yeah, I'm going to, but I just have a question first. What's the Dash.io KO matchup like? Do you know?
I think it's Dash.io favored. I think. Because it's a race, right? But then it's like so. Dash.io is like faster.
And I think Dash.io can probably, if they really want to, just play Balance of Justice, if they really wanted to. Okay. I agree with you. I think Verdance and Gravy are still tier 1.5 at worst, I think. So I think they are going to be 2 of the best decks in the format. I think Dash.io is still going to hang out around there because of just pure power level. And then I would say the same of KO and Prism. With Auxilio, I'm just not sold on Auxilio. I do think Auxilio is really powerful, but it's just not consistent still. So I think those are the 6 decks that I have my eye on. I think they're all powerful. They're all potentially good meta positions, and that kind of fills the the requirements I have of where to start when it comes to looking for Road to National season in terms of where to spend my energy and time at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Not a Kasai believer at all, you think?
No, I personally just don't think Kasai's very good. I just don't think
that's fine.
To be fair, the yellow card that came out in the
Blood
last
Follows
set,
Blade.
yeah, I do think is significantly upgraded because like I actually think it's crazy how big that upgrade is. It took Kasai, I think, from absolute trash tier to being a tier 2 deck. So if I think about the heroes I think in the format with Verdance, I still don't think that's going to be good for Kasai. I think the Gravy Bones nerf is like a reasonable one. I don't know enough about the Dash IO matchup personally.
Oh, I mean, Dash IO just gets fatigued. Like,
okay, makes sense.
Because I block so well. That deck has like 9 D-reacts or something like that, or like 11.
I assume Acilio is very good into Kasai.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a Kasai, you just feel you have no interaction, right?
Yeah.
You have like good numbers, and you block well. And yeah, Acilio just they have all the time in the world to find the combo.
Prism, I think from memory, good into Kasai. Depending on their setup, but
yeah, so Kasai does have all those D-reacts, right? Like Dynamos that keeps refreshing.
Yeah.
So it's like the Heralds can be like blocked out. The Auras are a bit of a problem, but Kasai can also like run some poppers. I would say it's like even-ish, that's like slight Prism favored, but like not like it's not like a Cilio Kasai where it's like Kasai kind of just gets fried.
And then you have KO.
Just a slight Prism favored.
So yeah. I think Kasai is in a decent spot, but I don't know if I'd have it in that top 6, but that's just me. I could see it. I could see it though.
You spoke about Blood Follows Blade. I think that is the card that made the Gravy matchup good. I don't think Gravy matchup was very good before it, but that just made it like, oh, you can kill like a Rigor Mortis, get a guy, and that guy sends an extra 3.
It's so good. That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on this potential Road to Nationals meta? Are you planning to be playing Road to Nationals? What are you thinking you're going to play at this point in time? It sounded like you were going to try and cope on some Marlin. If I'm coping on Reinhardt, but if you're taking it seriously, Pankaj, what do you think? Where do you think you're looking?
Ouch! That shade. I know. I actually am going to be starting on Marlin. I think if people are playing like the KOs and the Dash IOs and the Acilios, I kind of want to play the deck that punishes them for playing like Solitaire, if you will.
They're still going to be playing the Verdances and the Gravies, though. That's your problem.
Yeah, we'll see. Verdance, yeah, I don't know. They did take a nerf, and like losing Carapace on Verdance, unless they replace it with Fate Foreseen, that I will actually feel on the Marlin side, right? That is a pretty important piece they have to like dodge the disruption. So yeah, that's why I'm starting at least. And then I think my fallback is just going to be Verdance. My fallback of like the Marlin Cope doesn't go anywhere. I'll probably just play Verdance and figure out what I'm replacing.
Yeah, makes sense. Might even change a little bit. The deck might change a little bit, right? I like to start with just linear power in a fresh new format like this. So personally, I'm looking at KO. I will actually take a bit of a peek at Acilio, and I will probably have a bit of a look at Slippy just to check that there's not a power level there, because 3 very inherently powerful decks that want to do a thing, that's where I like to start, and then move off from there depending on where the meta starts to shake out, where I could see maybe Prism or Verdance or even, maybe Gravy being options post that. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't completely write off Marionette, but I just wonder if like Slippy just becomes again the better assassin, because Marionette has found a foothold because of just being an aggro deck that has really good Graphene math with some disruption, and I'm like, well, if Slippy has some, like, Slippy is just a good aggro hero, so if Slippy has some a good strategy or a good way to get back into the meta, obviously it's not Bonds now, but is there a good build with Mantles, for instance? And so, that's when I start to think about just Arachne is a pure aggro deck now that Syndra's out of the meta.
So what's interesting is that if Marios go towards more stealth versions, like with Mantles themselves as well, and like the stealth upgrades from the Armory deck, well, that sort of pushes Slippy even further into the ground, 100%. Right? Because you can't play Slippy into a field of Marios. That's just, oh gosh, that's so bad.
Well, I don't know. I've never lost the matchup as Slippy, but
okay.
if they're playing a bunch of stealth cards, then it's a bit different. I think Arachne was.
Oh yeah, true. When they're playing daggers, yeah, when they're playing daggers, like Slippy is fine, but like when they're playing stealth, it's like, oh brother.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, I think that's going to do it for episode 244 of Arsenal Pass. I think next week on the pod, we'll definitely have more to say as we enter literally the week before Road to Nationals. Are we podcasting next week on Christmas week? I guess we hadn't decided if we were doing that.
I mean, I'd be down. I feel there's one more retrospective I want to do before we end the year.
Okay.
That'll be about like the new systems, and maybe we go over every BNR that happened this year too. I think that could be a fun
predictions
one.
And stuff. All right. We can try and keep that a tight Christmas week pod, and then we'll come back to prepping for the Road to National season, because we've played some games, done a little bit of testing, and Road to Nationals will be kicking off that following week. So sounds like a plan. All right. Well, thank you to all of the Arsenal Pass patrons. Thank you to all our listeners out there. This has been episode 244 of Arsenal Pass. Happy holidays, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.